Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Film Seizure. I am Jeff Arbuckle, and we've got some fun movies to round out our 2022. But you know, I can't do it without a little help from my friends. I mean, that's a Ringo song, and this is all about Ringo, right?
Yeah, sure.
So, okay. Chuck Moore. Chuck, how's it going?
That's going good, man. How are you?
Doing all right. Jason Oliver.
Doing pretty solid. Doing well.
Doing great? Doing good?
Doing great and good.
And well?
And well.
Great, good, and well. I think is he fine, though?
Yeah.
I don't know if he's fine.
Oh, I'm fine.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
He's not fine.
She's in love with him, and he feels fine.
That's true.
Yeah.
We're just going to do this whole episode of
Yeah,
Beatles
just the
lyrics.
Beatles lyrics. Yep. So anyway, we have 1965's Help, starring the Beatles,
Hit me.
which is their second movie. We did their third movie, technically, although that wasn't really that. I guess technically we did their third and a half movie because it was their stuff, but not their voices previously with Yellow Submarine way, way back.
Yeah.
But
I didn't remember that wasn't their voices.
yeah,
Huh.
it wasn't. But this was one that I watched a lot as a kid.
Yeah.
Chuck, you also did.
Yes.
But this was a first timer for you, right?
Yes.
I could tell you weren't loving it.
It's fine.
See, there it is. Fine.
It's fine.
It's fine. It's very inoffensive. There's not really
Well-
there's not like well, yeah, that's true. It is kind of offensive actually. It is very much a product of its time.
But up until about 20 years ago, it's pretty
Yeah.
inoffensive.
It's inoffensively offensive.
It's yeah. It's got a few like ethnic problems, but yeah, it's kind of goofy. I can totally understand why you would like it as a kid and grow up with it and have fondness for it. Like I completely understand that. First time watch for someone in their 40s, it's a little bit much. It's kind of goofy. It's just sort of the same gag over and over again. There are some moments though that definitely made me chuckle. But yeah, it's not something I'll rush to see again anytime soon. I'll just listen to the album.
Yeah. I do kind of find myself as an adult wanting more of the music and less of the funny gags. But
Yeah.
I can't
it's still a
help.
fun movie.
I cannot help but compare it though to the Monkees movie Head, which I think is just a fucking masterpiece. I mean, I really like that movie. But that also feels as sort of absurd as that movie is. It also feels a little bit more mature in some of its jokes.
Well, that's because, I mean, and probably where that came from is the fact that the Monkees were
They're kind of shed their
well, they're parodying themselves.
Yeah.
But when you parody something that's a parody,
right.
you've kind of come back around
Is that
to
like a
kind of
double
taking
negative?
it serious.
Is that like a double negative?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
Did their
Like-
show come out before Head or after? Because that's goofy as hell.
Oh no,
The
no!
show
I mean,
was super goofy.
the show
was
is
that?
more like hell.
Yes, but
Yes.
did it come out after Head or
No,
before? I
before.
can't remember when the
Before.
show came out.
Well, we talked about this in the Head episode, but I did watch the Monkees show. And I loved the TV show as a kid.
Well, we watched a couple of episodes before
Yeah.
we watched the movie.
Yeah.
And it still was hitting.
Yeah, it definitely still works. And at least that one episode we watched did, yeah. But I haven't seen much more than that in a long time. But yes, I would agree. Help has more of that tone
100%. Yeah.
than the movie Head does. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that, you know, I mean,
It also,
is-
sorry, I'm going to interrupt you one more time. It
No,
also
no, go
helps
for it.
that the episodes of the Monkees are like 20-minute episodes, right?
right.
sure.
This is what, an hour and a half, 95 minutes or something.
Well,
This could have
it's-
been a 5-episode, 20-minute episode arc in modern times.
yeah,
Sure.
Like each set piece could have been its own episode, which is kind of what it felt like anyway. But all of the episodes were the same,
yeah.
if that makes sense. And it,
Yeah, no, that does. I mean, I think that what's funny about it is that there's absolutely a formula that this movie absolutely sticks to.
Oh yeah.
It's song, 10 minutes, song, 10 minutes, song, 10 minutes. And it does that basically for the entirety of the 90 minutes.
Yeah.
And it never deviates from that, which is probably smart back then. And the reason why probably this is a cartoon, honestly. This is probably more of a cartoon than their cartoon movie.
It's like Rocky and Bullwinkle.
Yeah,
It kind of
almost.
is.
Very Looney
Yeah.
Tunes. I mean, there's literally a scene where they cut a hole around Ringo, as he's drumming to make him fall through the floor. I mean, that's fucking like Roadrunner shit, you know?
Meat.
What I can kind of appreciate, though, about this movie is that, this is obviously way before the music video,
Yeah.
right? So for a lot of people, I mean, they get to go to see, Beatles obviously were a phenomenon when this movie came out, and people can go to the theater and see essentially like 5 or 6 different Beatles videos,
Right.
as a companion to the album, right? It's very much like a big marketing campaign, right?
Well, imagine being like a 14-year-old girl
Was
going
that a
to
John
see
Lennon
this.
reference?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Imagine no possessions.
And no religion, too.
Yeah. But no, imagine being like a 13-year-old, 14-year-old girl going to see this. It would be like being, I don't know, like a 16-year-old guy seeing, the I don't know, a movie that stars like a Playboy Playmate, or something. You're getting the music stuff, which is in a little bit of a way, you're getting little pieces of a concert. But then on top of that, you can just settle down through the in-between parts and just kind of stare at the eye candy. That probably was not an insignificant like draw for this whole thing. I mean,
Especially in America.
sure.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, like if you lived in the middle of nowhere, Utah, you got a movie theater, you probably don't have a place that the Beatles are playing,
Right.
or whatever. I mean,
It's kind of building
maybe they
off,
did go to Utah. I don't know.
building off the success of like how Elvis did it.
Sure.
Just in a goofier.
Yeah, I
way.
mean, this is something interestingly, this was in and of itself kind of a phenomenon of British pop bands doing movies in between about 1964 after the Beatles did Hard Day's Night
Right.
until about 66, 67. Every British pop band followed suit except for the Rolling Stones.
Right.
Herman's Hermits had a movie. I'm trying to think of some of the others, but
The Lovin' Spoonful, or are they American? I can't even remember.
they're American, I believe.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, pretty much every single one did, and that didn't happen as much over here. Although I'm sure what really happened, to the exception of the Monkees, which they just did everything that the Beatles did. What you would get over here would be like a beach party movie where Jan and Dean would show up and
Right.
play a song for the party and then move on to the next scene, and then they're gone. But they sold a few extra tickets because, some people went just for that
Or
moment.
Frankie and
Frankie Avalon, yeah. Or there was, yeah, I mean, Frankie Avalon was I mean, he did movies, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
so but they weren't necessarily vehicles like this was. It was more like let's have him be a silly stupid spy or something, or whatever. But anyway, but no, I mean, like, this was like a whole phenomenon where, like, if you were in a British pop band and you had something of a hit, you were like fast tracked right into being in movies.
Right.
And it was all because Hard Day's Night was a hit. And what's funny is that Hard Day's Night, I think, has even less of a story than this movie
Right.
does. Because in Hard Day's Night, they're just trying to get to a TV performance. And
The music
They had
matches a little better in Hard Day's Night.
Sure.
It's like this is a weird movie, not to interrupt, but it's weird because the music is very serious
Yeah.
in the Help album.
Yeah.
Like
It's my favorite Beatles album.
It's probably my second or third, probably third. But like Help is it's a sad song. Even though they play it up, it's a really sad song.
Right.
Even the fun songs, like one of my favorites, I've Just Seen a Face, is not even on this movie, and it would be perfect for this movie.
Right. Right. Well, and then you've got yeah, but I mean, like, you do have like Ticket to Ride, but you know, you're right where it's like this movie does kind of stop to do a song.
Right.
It breaks up vignettes, but a pieced together vignette, whereas like Head was entirely short vignettes that went from war in one scene to to Mike and Mickey at one point needing to suck the venom out of Terry Garr's finger and refusing to play a part of any of this shit. To then to Davey wanting to be a boxer.
That's a great scene.
Yeah.
I've not seen Head.
I highly recommend.
It's funny.
But yeah, so it's, you know, yeah, it is a very different it's a very different type of movie, but it's just the Beatles doing something that is, again, of its time, kind of inoffensive, even though this movie is a lot more adult than a lot of those other kind of rock star, pop star movies, because like there's one scene where like Paul McCartney gets shrunk down and he's naked.
Yeah.
That would have just, like in any of the other ones, they would have just probably shrunk him down with his suit on.
Right.
You know, where it's like he's actually having to think about covering his dick.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like in the way, even the Beatles were a little bit more mature.
Well, there's dick jokes in this too. Like
Yeah.
when the ring is being stolen, the first or second time, whatever, Ringo asks John, like, were you messing with me with a fishing pole? And he's like, I wouldn't touch you with a rubber one. Right. He's obviously talking. Yeah.
Right. Right. And, you know, it's like, you know, and Ringo even admits that he got the ring off of a hookup, a one night stand.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah. So
A lady.
right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, it's a wham bam, thank you, ma'am, and I'll take your ring while I'm at it.
Right.
Which I think is supposed to be the main girl's sister anyway.
It is. Yeah.
So yeah, that just anyway. So yeah, so this whole movie is Ringo has a ring that this weird Eastern religion group uses to mark a sacrifice. And then they basically chase after him. And then it brings in another you have like a scientist, and he's an idiot. And so like everybody's an idiot in this. And yet at the same time there's okay, wait a minute. At any point in time, Ringo could just give up the ring. Like, he can't get it off. Yes, that's the joke.
Yes.
But even when he like has the opportunity to have his finger shrunk just enough to pull the ring off, he fucks about, and like it can't happen because he's scared of the needle.
Well, yeah, and then people are breaking into the house they're in, which causes the girl to drop the needle in Paul's leg. I mean, if that's your whole story, is Ringo has this ring, if they get it off there, then the movie's over. And we miss out on 4 more music videos.
That's a good point.
Like, Jason had asked early, and I forgotten enough about this movie in the 20 years, 30 years, Jesus, probably 30 years since I've seen it. He was like, is this like the whole movie? And you're like, that's most of it. I mean, it's literally the whole fucking movie.
Pretty much.
It's the whole movie.
The one thing that changed, it does start to slow down in the second half, because once they introduce the scientist guy, and then they go to the Bahamas, it starts to spread out a little bit.
But that's like the final act, and it seems like it takes forever, honestly. I feel like I'm talking shit. I'm not, because I do enjoy it, but it's got lots of problems. Thank God the Beatles are in it.
Right. But again, I mean you got to also
take the Beatles out of this movie, and it's like, I don't know what the fuck it is.
No.
Well,
Even if you had their music for the whole thing, it'd still be a struggle. Right?
Yeah.
What happens if you replace them with, say, the Monkees?
I mean, it's probably
just one episode of the Monkees.
It's a very much too long episode of the Monkees, is what it is. Yeah.
Go ahead, Jason.
But no, it's interesting. I'm just kind of reading some of the critical responses to this, and it's funny that they were compared to the Marx Brothers. It's like, sorry guys.
Well,
you know why?
You're kind of funny, but you're no fucking Marx Brothers.
John, I wanted to talk about performances.
Yeah.
Because John almost kind of nails a couple Marx Brothers things. Like, he couldn't carry a whole movie as like a Marx Brother, but he does pretty good impressions of them.
And he's sort of helped
multiple times.
He's sort of helped through editing too. I mean, there his kind of like moments that are really funny are really like short burst cut. You know, like something that he says off, and that is
that's
just
kind
one
of a
liner.
Marx Brothers thing too, though.
I would say the style of this is a Marx Brothers style, where there's a very simplistic thing and you let the characters kind of play it out.
They're obviously not. I mean, I was actually, as an adult who's seen lots of movies now, I was impressed with John.
Yeah.
In this movie. And I'll admit that I have a great affinity for that man just in general. But I thought he was really good in this. I thought Ringo was actually pretty good.
Well, Ringo's the one who becomes an actor later.
Ringo carries this movie for me. Yeah, John has a couple moments, but Ringo carries this movie.
And he needs to. I mean, he's the central focus, right?
It's like...
But you just imagine, though, like, the writer's room on this movie. It's like, we need a plot. What if there's something with the ring and Ringo? Get it?
I didn't even put that together. Damn.
There would be somebody, though, in that room who would go, harumph!
Yeah, it probably would have been me.
Well, and these guys are the Beatles are notorious for being jokesters, like outside of.
This is a personality movie where you really get to see them.
You just let them go.
Well, reading a little bit more about this, though, Lennon particularly is kind of like, this movie was not in our control. We were all stoned out of our minds. Yep. We had no idea what was going on the whole time.
Yep.
It's like he literally says we were smoking marijuana for breakfast.
Yeah. This is one thing, though. I
am gonna real quick say, though, there are some one-liners that George has that are pretty good too in this.
Yeah, he's pretty funny in this.
Yeah, he's the one that always had the broader sense of humor anyway.
He's a little bit of the Zeppo in this, though. Zeppo Marx, because he's
the one when towards the end when they fucking drop the cage on John and Ringo. The first thing he does is, I'm out of here. He just takes off.
Yeah, it's funny. And he gets in a fight.
He ends up like ninja chopping people or like kicking them or something. Yeah.
I've done a lot of reading and paying attention to the Beatles over the last few years, because once I got Sirius XM, I think I listened to the Beatles channel for like 3 years straight. Legit, every time I was in the car. And I started reading every interview I could get my hands on for John. And some for like John was just the most interesting to me, but he spent the whole 70s and early 80s until he died disowning anything he thought might hurt his image. So he talks a lot, like the stuff he says about we were stoned, we had no control. I don't buy that entirely. I think it's John just distancing himself from something he doesn't like that he did.
Well,
I get that feeling from him a lot.
Well, I mean, think of it like this, because he's the one. Interestingly, he was the least successful of the four solo-wise because he went a little bit more artistic. John.
Yeah,
Paul and George were the two most successful.
I would say he was more avant-garde. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
He probably had the biggest single out of any of them, though.
Well, yeah. I mean, nobody's sitting around singing All Things Must Pass when the pandemic hit.
Right. So to say he was, they should have, right?
Should have. But they also knew that was horse shit because we're still in it.
Right. That's pretty good, Jeff.
Funny.
That's good. But yeah, Ringo is successful touring because he was a Beatle.
Sure.
John wrote good songs, but he had that rock and roll mentality.
Well, he didn't want to be called former Beatle John Lennon. He just wanted to be John Lennon. Paul McCartney could be Paul McCartney.
Right.
Paul George
McCartney
Harrison could be
up.
right. But at the same time, though, it's like Paul McCartney did not have to be called Paul McCartney of the Beatles because Wings was extremely successful too.
Right.
And
George used everything he learned. He was probably always a decent songwriter,
but he was a good producer too.
He must have learned a lot from John and Paul about songwriting.
Sure.
And then he obviously flourished in the 70s and 80s.
And he flourished with a lot of like spirituality stuff too, which was very different for that time.
Yeah.
So he right, but I buy that like John would have distanced himself as much as possible.
Yeah.
And try to step away.
Here's an interesting little factoid. So one of the working titles for this movie was 8 Arms to Hold You.
Yeah, I knew that because of Khalili or Kali or whatever they were basing that on.
That later became an album title for the band Veruca Salt. Mm-hmm. Veruca Salt's dad,
Roy Kinnear,
and Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory is in this movie. Yes.
Yeah.
And Veruca Salt
QAnon, eat that.
Veruca Salt uses the line the walrus, or like they use the walrus was Paul, but they use it as the seether was Janine or whatever her name is.
Yeah.
They totally rip a Beatles line for that.
Yeah, they were very cheeky, that Veruca Salt.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, basically, like, this movie is pretty much admitted to by Bob Rafelson as being the inspiration for the Monkees sitcom.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that's obvious.
It's totally there.
Well, yeah, because if you think about it, this came out in 1965. It's a hit. He sees it. He was already thinking about how can we make how can we serialize a band like the Beatles,
right?
Except for not be constantly popular. So, I mean, again, like Hard Day's Night, they are being chased through the streets. In this, the first time you see them, the little old ladies are waving to them. They don't really care who they are. It's like, the only thing they say is that that their success hadn't gotten to them.
Right.
Yeah.
But they're not screaming at them. They're not asking for anything from them. They're just wave to them or whatever. Like they're normal people.
I can't help but think though that this movie is a lot about fandom. Like, everybody wants something from the Beatles, right?
Oh, sure.
It's focused on Ringo, obviously, but somebody's trying to take from the Beatles something they're willing to give. Like, is the whole message of this movie to me is like, we give you everything, but still you want more.
You want our lives.
It's kind of cynical. It's almost like cynical, like modern artists are about.
Well, they're about to get super cynical in about a year after this movie comes out. No, that's a good point because it's like, as a kid, I'm just watching the cartoonish antics.
Right. You don't see what. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't have that greater understanding of that
Yeah. Since we can't help but compare this to the Monkees. Help. I feel like the biggest mistake and probably the best thing the Monkees ever did was bite the Beatles. Because I remember, like, they got famous, obviously, because of the show. The show helped, right? Certainly helped.
They won an Emmy for best comedy in their first season.
Yeah.
So they were a success right out of the gate.
But everybody, even up until I was, mid 80s, I was like 8, 9, 10. Every adult I ever talked to was like, they can't play their instruments. They copied the Beatles. It's like they never made it on their own merits. It like screwed them almost.
Sure.
Right.
Well, because this was at a time where, like, think about if they came along 30 years later, they were a boy band.
Right.
So it's the same. It's the beginning of that. Well, not really even the beginning. It was the height of the first wave of manufactured.
Yeah, they're not an organic band.
Right.
Yeah.
However, the simple truth was they did have to learn their instruments because they did concerts.
Right.
So they did learn. But yeah, I mean, they had studio guys, to the exception of Headquarters, where they played everything themselves. But it's, but no, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, like, they were probably better off to do, to basically, just focus on the show. But they also, the problem with them is that they had a show and they had to sell an album, but they released as many albums as the Beatles did in half the time.
Listeners, if you want Jeff's full breakdown on the history of the Monkees, you can listen to our episode about the movie Head. And Jeff goes.
Yeah, that was like episode 40 or
Jeff
something.
Jeff goes into great detail about all of this and more.
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't there, but I can't help but compare the two.
Sure. I mean, no, you have to, because it's like this movie led to the Monkees, which then led to Head, which was, but yeah.
So back to this movie.
Right.
The song, I want to talk about the song Help, because it's one of my favorite rock vocals, I think, ever, and one of my favorite songs ever. I think John wrote it in like 24 hours.
Probably.
I think they were like, this is the title of the movie, and we need a single for it.
Well, that's a good question. What came first? I mean, was it the song? Was it the album, or was it the movie? Or were they realized at the same time?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the movie was named and then he wrote the song for it. And he says years later, and this is what, like, you gotta, when you listen to John, you have to really think about what he's saying and if he's trying to lead you or not, because he says this song was a literal cry for help. And he wanted it to be played slower and a more like painful kind of tune, I
Closer
guess.
to Yesterday, probably.
Yes.
But George Martin, one of the things that George Martin pushed, I don't want to say push, but probably influenced the Beatles the most was their hard drum line.
Yeah.
And so that probably by nature, Martin probably sped the song up.
Yeah, well, and interestingly, this is like one of the first songs ever they used tape-to-tape reduction. I think it's the first song ever where you have a 4-track recording, and they were taking 2 4-track recordings and merging them into 1 track.
Oh, wow.
So they could get more.
This would have been probably about this time where they were starting to experiment a lot more.
Yeah, it's like the precursor to Revolver, right?
Yeah, because after this is Rubber Soul, which was absolutely the direct lead into Revolver, because Norwegian Wood was very experimental in that, and the sitar started to kind of come in.
Yep.
Yeah. Huh. Interesting.
Yeah. So what else about this movie or the songs in it?
Well,
I know this is your favorite Beatles album. Do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, so there's a couple of things about it. When I growing up, and Chuck, this was probably the same for you, but like the albums of the Beatles that were available until CDs came along were the American Capitol Records releases.
Right.
Which were entirely different than the actual albums that they now have on CD.
Right.
Because I remember when CD started coming out, I was like, I'm going to start getting all the Beatles albums on CD. I'm like, wait a minute, this doesn't look right. It's like, what?
Track list is weird. And,
Right. Because with Help, it was very similar to the Head soundtrack, whereas in Head, it was like a clip from the movie, a song, a clip from the movie, a song, and then back and forth. Head was some George Martin stuff intermixed with the songs only from the movie, because I think most of the other side of the British release was released here as Beatles 65.
Yeah.
I think.
I think that's true.
Because I think that was what Yesterday was on. But yeah, and like I think Dr. Roberts is on is on Dr. Robert. I think is on Help also. But yeah, I think all of those were on Beatles 65. But like, so the album is, you know, like the first side are the songs from this movie, which all the songs from this movie are just, any one of those could have been number one hits. And probably most of them were. Yeah, like Ticket to Ride probably was, and Help probably was.
Help, I'm pretty sure was. There was a couple that aren't even in this movie that went to Yesterday. And
right. Well, of course, Yesterday is the most played song in radio history.
Right.
So, yeah, it's like, yeah, so it's the second side of the album sounds very similar to the songs that are in this movie, but there's some pretty serious songs on that.
Yeah.
And actually, I want to pull up the... Say something, Chuck, because I'm
going to say something. So when I was...
See, look, we're doing our own Beatles movie now.
Beatles for me when I was a kid, it's kind of weird because I experienced them the way everyone else probably would have. I didn't have albums. I heard number one singles. And then when
my brothers being older, they had a bunch of vinyl.
My parents, I think, had two that I did listen to, and I probably have in my possession now. But... when I first started to love the Beatles is when I got my first CD player and I bought the red and blue. It's like the classics.
Oh, yeah.
The drug years.
The 62 to 65 and 66 to 70. Yeah.
And that wasn't an album formation. So I didn't know the Beatles in that way.
You're just hearing them in their evolution from start to finish.
I just hit something there. Sorry, everybody.
Jeez, the whole place is exploding.
Yep. Almost had a fiasco like we did that one time.
I don't even remember what that was.
Jason when I crawled under the table.
Oh, God, that's right.
It was a very Beatles help moment.
It really pretty much was. Jason's lived that movie, and he doesn't even know it.
Yeah.
He doesn't even remember the time we had to save him from a weird Eastern religion that wanted to sacrifice him.
No. What's that sawing sound?
I just disappeared.
He just drops it through the like, floor. All right. Well. Yeah. So okay. So the songs from the movie are "Help,"
I Need Somebody.
Yeah. "The Night Before."
Yeah.
That's good. That's a good tune. That's the Paul. And "You've Got to Hide Your Love Away," which is a really pretty serious song that kind of comes in out of nowhere.
Yeah,
in this movie.
Yeah, and there's some subtext there that no one's ever proven true, but maybe about Bob Epstein being... Is it Bob Epstein? Is that his name?
Brian
Epstein, thank you. I think he was a homosexual.
He was.
And John maybe wrote that song about him. Maybe.
Yeah, there's a lot of rumor that John and Brian had a fling. And that possibly what led to Brian ultimately doing drugs and passing away from depression was possibly due to unrequited love. I have no idea.
Those are rumors.
Those are rumors. Those are salacious things that people could make up. But it was true that Brian Epstein was gay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then "I Need You," which is just George Harrison saying, "Hey man, what's up? I need you."
Yeah, what's up? I need you.
"Another Girl," which is the other Paul song. "You're Going to Lose That Girl," which is where Ringo gets sawed through the...
John sounds so good in that. Like, I just love John's voice, but that recording of his voice is like... I don't love that song.
I like that song.
I like it. I don't love it, but his vocals on that song are just like, that's what I think of when I think of John Lennon.
Yeah, it's very crisp and very, it cuts.
Yeah.
Is that a good way of saying it?
That's good enough for me.
Good enough for you? Because how's that doing for you?
It cuts Ringo right out of the floor.
It cuts him right out of the floor. It's him that's sawing. Yeah. It just so happens that the guys are underneath in the basement.
Yeah. It's dumb luck.
It's just dumb luck. Just dumb luck. And the girl just happened to be there to save him.
Yeah. How many times does Ringo go through the floor in this? At least 3.
3 times.
It's exactly 3. He gets sawed out. The beer trap.
The beer trap, which then they dump the beer all over the Scotland Yard guy.
Yes. And then when they has the electric gate thing.
The electric gate thing, yeah.
Wild. All right, continue with your song list.
Then Ticket to Ride, which is that's a good one.
Yeah.
That's a real good one. And I always think so.
John is at like his peak songwriting. It feels like a lot of.
Well, he's at his peak vocal sounding too. I think. So there are two things about this movie that I constantly think about to this day. For the last 35 years since the first time I saw this movie, to today, I still think about the scene. So they find out that the Ringo has the sacrificial ring. And kudos to you, Chuck, for remembering some of the whose name is inaccessible.
Yeah.
And all that stuff that Leo McKern says. But the first, so there's 5 attempts to try to get the ring back from Ringo. And a couple of these I think about a lot. Like the one where he sticks his hand into the mailbox and the guy's grabbing for it. And then like John doesn't believe him that anything's going on. And then the guy gets up and walks away with the mailbox. But
stupid.
It's so stupid, but it's as a kid, it's fucking hilarious.
Funny, yeah.
But the one thing I still think about to this day, and I swear to God, I thought about it last night when I was in the bathroom of the movie theater and I was drying my hands off in the Dyson air blower thing. And that is one of the attempts is they're in a bathroom and Ringo goes over to use the blower to dry his hands, and it's reversed, so it's sucking him into it.
They've gone from suck to blows.
Well, they went the other way. They went from blow to suck.
I know.
But it starts like ripping off like his sleeve, and like George walks into the bathroom, is like, "Hey, what's going on?" It's just the shirt rips out from underneath his jacket.
That nearly killed me. And it's so well done too. Like I don't know if they have strings on all their stuff.
And they have to.
How the hell they did that?
They had to. But then like I think about that every time, and I kind of chuckle every time. I'm standing there at the air blade like an idiot, chuckling about. It's like, this would really suck all my fucking clothes off if it, because Dyson, they don't mess around.
I think my favorite part of that scene is Paul. He's trying to like stop the water.
Oh yeah, because he pulls the sink off the wall.
Like why?
Well, and then after it's all like, the girl comes in and it's multiple times she pulls the same switch to save them.
Yeah, it's like the same shot.
It's the same shot, except for one time she actually says she's not who she seems to be.
That is that time.
That is that time.
Yes.
And meanwhile, George is looking inside his sleeve, like wondering where his shirt went.
Yeah.
And then he shows it to John, who has nothing wrong with him.
No.
John lost nothing in the vacuum. That kills me. The other thing that I always think of is when they're in the Alps. And they're all like piled up on that sled and they're going down the mountain and they're all saying cold, 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 cold. And I think that every time I go out the first time it gets really cold.
It's kind of like almost like an army procession. Like,
exactly. Right.
But that's like the iconic, like stuff that I remember from this movie is all from the snow scene.
Well, yeah, because that's the album cover.
The album cover.
Yeah.
It's it's the video I remember is filmed out there. I think
it seems like that clip is always used in clip retrospectives and things like that. Yeah,
it's like it's that, and it's Strawberry Fields Forever where they're under that tree with the stand-up piano.
Yeah.
But those are the things I always think about this movie. And I'm not gonna lie, I was it's like when I was like, I want to do this movie, I was thinking about those two scenes in particular.
They still hold up. Both of the, that stuff still holds up.
There's a lot of jokes in this that hold up. There's a lot of things I didn't understand when I was a kid. I understand better. Like, I knew that they were finding pieces of the chef in their soup because they literally show before it cuts away, the guy's dumping the guy all the way into the soup.
Yeah.
In the back room. But like, I didn't understand when I was a kid what a season ticket was.
I don't like seasoning in my soup.
But like, now I it's like a season ticket to a thing. Yeah. It's like, okay. But like,
Well, I think he even says, John, and this cracked me up if I heard him correctly, because there's a lot of mumbling track.
There's
to
a
this
lot
movie.
of British in this movie.
Yes, a lot. It feels a lot like a Monty Python movie.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, but
It's like a really long Monty Python bit.
Yes, too long. Of Monty Python. But he's like, there's footprints in here. I think he says.
Yeah, he does.
Cracks me up.
It's interesting because didn't Ringo kind of sort of make a Monty Python movie? Was that the Magic Christian?
No. George solely funded Life of Brian.
Yeah.
Was the story I always heard.
Well, yes, but I mean, Ringo was in the Magic Christian, which I'm pretty sure had John Cleese and Graham. What's his name?
I don't know. I know he was in Caveman.
Graham.
I always mess it up.
Can't remember his last name.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think it's like an official Monty Python movie, but there are Monty Python like.
Oh, maybe
Graham Chapman.
Yeah. But you're right. Yeah, George Harrison, obviously. Yeah.
I mean, he was pals with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, he just really wanted to see Life of Brian. He thought that sounded hilarious.
He was right.
He is absolutely right.
Yeah.
You get to see fucking Dong in that, and it's hilarious.
That movie is just a classic. I honestly, most days I like it better than Holy Grail. Yeah.
I do not, but I do like it a lot. All of their stuff is awesome.
Well, Meaning of Life also has the better get a bucket or because I'm going to throw up.
Yeah.
And I think about that daily too.
Yeah. Better get a bucket.
No, so yeah, it's where were we?
We were talking about the two moments that you.
Oh yeah.
Right, and you already talked about them, so we're done with that.
Well, there's the second half of the album here. Hang on a second, because this is the second half that's got songs on it that like puts it over the top.
Yeah.
There's the cover of "Act Naturally," which Ringo does. Dr. Roberts on
Rubber Soul
or Revolver.
Oh,
one or
it
the
is
other.
on Revolver. I get confused because the tracks change depending on which version you have.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the American, because Revolver is the first American album that gets closer to the British releases, but there are a couple of missing tracks on the American release.
Yes.
But yeah, so but no, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 right in a row on the B side of Help. It's Only Love, which is John Lennon. That's a good one. You Like Me Too Much, which is a George song.
Yeah.
Tell Me What You See, and I've Just Seen a Face, both Paul songs.
I've Just Seen a Face. I think I said this earlier. Is one of my favorite songs ever. It's so simple
It's
like a
jaunty.
perfect jaunty pop song.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interestingly, about It's Only Love, John said after that, he's like, that is the last song I wrote out of necessity. That didn't mean anything to me.
That's wild because it's a
good tune. They're not bad at writing songs, so everything they write is good almost.
Yeah, it's like I can't listen to a whole Beatles album and imagine. I can't imagine what it was like to try to pick a single to release.
Well, they could release anything.
Right. Exactly, and then it's like
crazy.
And then it's like I don't know, put any of them on the B side.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about favorite bands and people's favorite bands. But the one argument I will never understand from anybody is the Beatles suck. Like, I just cannot fathom anyone not liking at least half of their songs. Or even a quarter. And you couldn't say they sucked if you liked a quarter of their music.
I know. I know. And it's like...
it's just wild. I have friends that don't like...
I pulled a Jason.
Yeah. I know. They do.
But no, it's like... And that's the thing. It's like... it's like there are some people who I would peg as liking the later stuff who are like, oh no, I like the earlier stuff way more. It's way happier. I like that way more. I'm like, you gotta be kidding. You like the early, it's like I like the whole breadth.
Right.
I mean, my two favorite albums is Head and the White Album. Talk about wide.
Right.
Help. You said Head.
I said Ed, didn't I? Help.
You got monkeys on the brain.
I know, right? Well, because we were talking about that earlier.
You've got monkey brains.
I do.
Yeah, I was when I was a kid. This is kind of interesting to me. When I was a kid, when I first really discovered the Beatles in my teen years, it was all about the Blue albums. The Blue double album, trippy, whatever, weird Beatles stuff. As an adult, I'm growing to love the earlier stuff more. And I always liked all of it. But now I'm like, I want to listen to Help.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of putting on Revolver. I want to listen to Beatles for Sale. Like that, I wouldn't have done that 30 years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and just to close the loop on this, the last two songs on Help were Yesterday and Dizzy Miss Lizzie, which we talked about Yesterday being already such a huge hit.
Right.
And then Dizzy Miss Lizzie is just, of course, it's one of the last times they really did covers.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Jason, talk a little bit about the Beatles. We've kind of been running with this one.
I mean, I don't know. What do you want to know?
Well, what are some of your favorite Beatles albums and stuff? We didn't really talk about it so much in the Yellow Submarine way back when. But this is, I mean, the thing is with this is that it's such a, this is such a small movie with a lot going on that actually really isn't a whole lot that we can talk about. So let's just talk about the Beatles.
There really isn't a lot to talk about in this movie, but yeah, I grew up with the early stuff. My dad was definitely like a fan of the first half of their career, not so much the trippier drug-fueled years.
Which sounds like a lot like my mom.
Yeah. Like I definitely, that was kind of my introduction to the Beatles, and then I discovered the later stuff on my own, really, because my dad didn't really listen to it. But Revolver is my favorite album. Tomorrow Never Knows is my favorite song.
Oh wow, that's a trippy.
Yes,
that's some
is.
trippy business.
Yes, it is.
How did you feel about that cover that was used for The Craft or whatever it was?
I don't really remember who made that.
I have no idea. Doesn't matter. It's not the Beatles.
Yeah,
they're one of those rare bands too that nobody can cover. Like there are good covers of the Beatles out there, but like
there's some good ones. There's some good ones.
Susie and the Banshees did a really good version of Dear Prudence.
Yep, it's a very good.
The
version.
original's better.
Oh, absolutely.
That's what
I mean.
This is my favorite Beatles song.
That the cover is better than the original.
It is pretty rare. I'll admit that. But a lot of the covers, like a lot of Beatles covers, are just like. It's weird because their songs are very simple, especially the early ones. And when people cover them, you're like, this is generic. But when the Beatles do it, it's not.
Well,
like,
usually have to
works.
bring something a little fresh and new to it. Like
Right.
Fiona Apple, her
Across the Universe.
Across the Universe is wonderful.
I love it.
Yeah,
I did like that movie Across the Universe.
Yeah.
And that was a whole album of covers. I Am Sam had a whole album of covers.
There's some good ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the couple were Amy Mann and Michael Mann.
Yep.
Or Michael Penn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amy Mann and Michael Mann.
Yeah.
The Mans.
Well, since
Mans
they're
covered the
together,
Beatles.
if he took her last name, it'd get real confusing.
Yeah. No one would know who he was anymore. Who's this Michael Mann fella?
All right. So, anyway, continue on, Jason. Sorry.
I mean, I don't really have much more to add. Yeah.
All right. Well, Chuck.
Who's your favorite Beatle?
I mean,
I'll put you on the spot.
I don't really have one.
Okay.
I can't honestly say I have one.
Well, do you have a favorite in their solo career? Because I would say John is my favorite in the Beatles, but obviously George is my favorite in the solo.
I gotta go with Paul there.
Okay.
Like I really like a
a
lot of the Wings stuff quite a bit. Yeah.
I'll tell you what.
The Speed of Sound album is really good.
Oh, Band on the Run is.
Band on the Run is like was one of my obsessions last year. Like I listened to it constantly because I was always like
I love Jet.
a Paul Denier. Like post Beatles Paul Denier because I was like John, like so when I started to give up on all that bullshit, I was like I'll listen to Paul's stuff, and Band on the Run is just phenomenal. That album Jet is a great tune. Yeah,
but I mean I do like some of the really fucking out there Ono band stuff. Like I really do. It's goofy and weird sometimes, but I don't know. Sometimes it's just like I'm into it.
Well, Instant Karma is another one of my favorite songs ever, and it's a weird tune. Like even like the production of it is weird.
I like the experimentation.
Well, they're not clean at all.
No, that Instant Karma is that one that's got a weird count to it?
I think so. Well, I think it's because John can't keep a beat.
No,
He can't. He really can't.
because it starts with a drum roll.
Boom.
Well, yeah, it's like the piano and then into an awkward drum roll.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, what you got playing drums? Mickey Dolenz?
Yeah.
What's going on there?
Yeah. Who are you? John Lennon and the Monkees? What's going on here? Come on. What's going on? Huh?
It was
What's going on? Huh?
no, I mean, last year, of course, I had to get the 50th anniversary of All Things Must Pass. That is...
Did you get the vinyl box set of it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I thought about picking that up.
That was, I mean, it was just sitting there on the shelf at Target. I'm like, yep, gonna do it. I'm gonna pull that trigger because this is good shit. Yeah, I mean, I think that what's funny is that it's like it is hard to pick. And the one I don't like when people rag on Ringo, because it's like you guys don't know that Pete Best was a bad drummer.
Right.
You think Ringo is the luckiest guy in the world. If they kept Pete Best, there would be no Beatles.
Well, you know what's
not in the same way.
Probably. You're probably right. And Ringo is definitely adept, and a lot of drummers will tell you so. What's funny about all that, to me, is that everybody has a favorite Beatle, right? Well, except for Jason. He's
don't.
the only one that doesn't
have a favorite
I'm making
Beatle.
a joke here, but everyone has a favorite Beatle, and nobody's is Ringo. But every Beatles...
My mom's is.
Ringo's
Really?
my
My
favorite
mom loves
actor
the drummers.
of the four.
My mom loves the drummers. She loved Ringo, Mickey, and Don Henley.
Let's say I'm speaking in absolutes, but
Okay.
you understand what I'm saying.
No, yeah. I mean,
But every Beatles' favorite Beatle is Ringo.
well, yeah, he probably
They all fucking love Ringo.
he probably had the best shit.
Well,
Yeah, probably.
to be quite honest, when they were all alive and in their prime, the one I'd want to hang out with the most is Ringo. He just seems like the one that's like the least up his own ass.
Yeah, maybe.
Nah, I'm gonna hang out with George still because I'm gonna go hang out with Monty Python as well.
That's fair. George is probably a close second. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, George's best friend was Jackie Stewart. So you're going to Formula One races. You're going into garages. You know, it's like, come on.
It's funny.
Well,
it's
if
funny
you hung
the
out with
stuff-
John, you could hang out with Bob Dylan too, though.
Fair enough. I mean, fair enough. But
They'd probably be like boring. But
Yeah.
But George literally hung out with Bob Dylan and Tom Petty for a while.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
they should have made better music. They made some great songs. They made some great songs.
They made some
but
pretty good music. dude.
It's just it's wild though. Like if you think about that number of talent, like
Well, it's going to eventually start
it's got to
to
be the greatest supergroup ever. I would think. And they wrote like they were hanging around a campfire, which is cool. I love that for them. But we could have gotten such better stuff out of them. Is all I'm saying. If they wanted to do it.
Hey man,
Yeah,
you go
maybe.
go tell
I mean-
go tell it to Jeff Lynne. He's the one who produced them.
Yeah, I mean it's good. I'm not talking shit about
It's
the Wilburys. I love them.
That is a crazy fucking supergroup, though. I mean,
Yeah.
And the one that people usually forget about is Roy
Orbison.
Right.
Yeah.
That's because his chair was empty in the video. It's really
Only
sad.
the second
Yeah.
video.
Yeah.
The first video, he was there. He was hanging out.
So
Yeah, but and Ringo was hanging out there too. So I guess all right, fine. Ringo does one of my favorite songs on Wildflowers, or he does the drums on one of my favorite songs on Wildflowers. So okay,
yeah, I mean Ringo and George continued to do stuff with Paul and John.
yeah.
And John and Paul would never get back together again, which is
Yeah.
unfortunate. A wild thing that I discovered years ago. I think you and I read a Rolling Stone. I'm looking at Jason now. Rolling Stone interview of John Lennon,
Oh, yeah.
and it was done in 1970. Do you know how old John Lennon was when the Beatles broke up?
In 1970, he was 30.
How wild!
Yeah,
The entire Beatles discography, the entirety of it, was done by the time that man was 30 years old.
yeah,
Yeah, it's pretty insane.
It's insane.
yeah.
The
He
level
died at
of-
40.
Yeah.
And he lived multiple lives in 40 years.
Yeah, there's a picture. It's kind of funny. You look at a picture of the Traveling Wilburys, and like Roy Orbison looks like a 70-year-old now. He was like 52.
Right.
Tom Petty was like 40, and he looked like he was 52. It's like you look at that picture. I'm like, that's like us hanging out, and they look 30 years older than us. At least in my mind.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm weird, but
You're not weird. There's actually that's like a documented phenomenon too, because of the changing fashion and technology. And when we look at older photos of people that are the same age as us, we naturally imagine them older than they really are, because of the anachronism isn't the right word, but it's along those lines. Yeah.
Well, we're probably also picturing them always being older than us.
Yeah.
So it's like we can't imagine being their age.
Yeah.
It's like I always said, I got to a certain point. I can't remember when it was. It was like 32, 33, 34 or something. That once I passed that, I was in the realm of I never saw myself as this old every year that passed, every day that passed.
right.
Because when we were 18, most of the people we're watching in movies were older than that, and we never thought about, oh, we'll never look like that. We never be like that.
Yeah.
I certainly am never going to gain any weight.
Nope. Still look great.
I'm looking great.
Looking great.
Looking great. It's a good thing that I bounced right back up when I fixed the thing in the refrigerator earlier.
Yep.
That didn't look weird at all when I came in.
This is the weirdest episode ever. Probably.
No, it's fine.
Probably. Yeah.
It's fine. I mean, it's a weird movie, man. I mean, I just wanted to talk about the Beatles. And
It's
watch
kind
the
of
movie.
fun to just talk, like not have to talk about a linear
Yeah, this is almost like one of our
retrospective
yeah,
episodes or
yeah.
specials. Is there anything else in the movie? I don't know of anything else in the movie. I mean, it ends with a freaking wild ass fight
where
in the
the ring
Bahamas.
begins to
switch owners.
switch owners. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like Lord of the Rings or something.
Well, that's the funny thing is that all Ringo does to get rid of the ring is just point, and it flies off his hand, and he's like, "Oh, hey!"
Yeah,
It's like I'm
it's the
free
first
of it.
time he unclenched his fist the whole movie or something.
But I do like there's the one scene that I also always think about, not in the same way, but like when it happens, it's like, oh man, this is. I used to think this was so freaking funny. I still do think it's funny, but when they go to the jeweler, and first of all he tries to saw the ring off of Ringo's finger, and it breaks the saw, and then he tries the wheel. The
Julie,
electric
you
saw.
failed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like he just keeps calling him jeweler.
Yeah.
And it's like when I was real little, it's like, why is that guy's name Julie? And then I realized, oh no, he's like
Jula.
because he does the same thing later.
Well,
Scientist.
he does a scientist. You failed.
Yeah,
Scientist, you
you
failed.
Yeah.
That's probably John just not remembering the names of the characters when making the movie.
I don't know. I suspect it was just John being a dick to him.
Maybe. I don't know how
suspect
much of
John
a dick
could
John.
be a dick. I suspect he could be.
I think by the 70s and 80s he most certainly was, which is weird because he came around on love songs and
Yeah.
all that peace and love stuff. He was like, I was wrong about that, but then he seemed like a total asshole all the time. I don't know. It's weird. He's a weird dude. Not like Paul, who seems like, and I'm projecting maybe, but Paul seems superficial a lot of the times. John never does. But John seems surly. And Paul
Right.
just, I don't know. They
I think
definitely have
it's
their own
probably just
personas.
how they carry themselves. Because what's interesting is I did hear something about Paul McCartney, interestingly, about another music movie. They were interviewing the guy who played Elvis, Austin Butler.
Yeah.
And I think he was like in, I don't know what show he was on, but he was talking about, it's like, he ended up, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it ended up that he ended up taking a train ride with Paul McCartney. And like, he said that Paul McCartney just talked to him like a normal guy. Like,
Yeah.
he was freaking out. But Paul McCartney was just like, how's your day? You want something to drink? You want to hang? It's like, what was it like to play Elvis?
Yeah, as an old man, Paul seems very jovial.
Yeah.
I'm talking more about their older, like, Let It Be video. Like, I don't know.
Oh, God, the Let It Be movie is a train wreck. No wonder they keep that hidden.
Yeah, but the Let It Be sessions that they filmed that Peter Jackson did, like, John was really timid. Paul was overbearing. It's really kind of weird.
Oh yeah, it was mostly. I mean, from everything I understood, and this goes back to because one of the documentaries I watched a ton as a kid was The Complete Beatles.
Yeah,
and it was so good that I loved the parody of it, The Complete Al, with Weird Al. Yeah,
nice.
But they, if everything that I understood, it was typically Paul who was getting on people's nerves, that he was becoming very, very much of a perfectionist, and George just wasn't digging it. And Ringo left the White Album sessions, and they thought maybe he wasn't going to come back.
Well, George left once, and they didn't think he was going to come back. A lot of that with Paul, and
then
I think
Paul
John
brought them back together, and then he was like, "Okay, this is the last album, I'm gone." And then he broke up. Like, he brought them all back, and then he was the one who left.
Yeah,
yeah,
asshole. Beatles are great. That's the last thing I want to say about this.
Yeah, pretty great. We could talk for many more hours about the Beatles.
They will fascinate me forever.
Yes, and their influence on each of our lives, although apparently
Jason's not interested in talking about the Beatles.
He's just, hey, whatever, man.
What do you want from me?
Word or two.
Well, we'd like a word with you.
Yeah.
From you.
No, did it, though? I think
we probably did. Yeah, I mean, the Beatles, I mean, what you said, Help is only on like Apple TV or something, right?
I think it's rentable on Apple TV.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if you have that and you want to rent it,
I think,
and you like the Beatles,
place it's rentable though. Yes.
Yeah.
I say still watch it. Get a little slice of mid-60s goofy
British humor.
Very goofy British humor.
Yeah.
Way better than almost every other pop star movie that came out in 1965. But I agree with Jason. Probably not as artistically interesting as Head.
Or as funny, honestly.
That is true. I love
Head
that
is
a lot.
really funny. I mean,
there's another thing I think about where I just want to ride up on somebody on horseback and lean over and go, psst, and then ride off.
Yes.
See, now we're bringing it back. Let's just talk about Head.
Now he's in.
Oh, it's so good.
And leave the guy wondering, like, what? All right, so so no, this was good stuff. Jason, what's coming up next week?
Is next week Brewster's Millions?
It is.
That's coming up next week.
Chuck, where can they follow us to find out when these things happen?
Well, you can go to filmseizure.com. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, wherever people are followable.
YouTube. Yeah, and Instagram.
Instagram is the one.
We're not yet on Grindr.
Oh yeah. I don't know if we'll get there.
Well, speak for yourself, man.
I didn't mean as individuals. I meant as Film Seizure.
Anyway, yes, subscribe to like SoundCloud, Spotify, TuneIn, Stitcher, Apple, Google Podcasts, all those places. You can find out where things happen. You can also just subscribe to the blog.
Yeah.
And it'll just get emailed to you.
Yeah.
We have a couple hundred people.
It sounded like you said Goober Podcast, which
Podcast.
We totally need to be on Goober Podcast.
I need to make a note of that. Make a note of that.
Oh.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's going to be. Sorry. I'm in the course of writing other things. So
Richard Pryor.
Yeah. So Richard Pryor, John Candy next Wednesday. Brewster's Millions. I think that's going to be another interesting conversation.
Probably
because I think you can't talk about it without shifting to, well, what would you do?
Yeah.
I was thinking about that all day.
Spend the money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also, somebody please help me with the rules. But anyway,
Yeah.
so that's next Wednesday. Next Monday on Monster Mondays, also found at all those Film Seizure places. I am in the midst of my year-end Universal Monster sequel month, and I've got The Mummy's Tomb. So that is yet another one of those Karis entries. This Friday, speaking of the monkeys, this might actually be kind of perfect. And also kind of sad because it's right around the 1-year anniversary of Mike Nesmith's passing.
Yeah.
But on B Movie Enema, I'm going to have an article about the movie Time Rider, The Adventures of Lyle Swan, which Michael Nesmith did the soundtrack for.
I always wanted to see that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, after I write about it, I'll let you.
I can see the movie cover in my head right now.
Yeah, the motorcycle guy.
Yeah, with like a sunset kind of thing behind.
Well, it's like a whole 80s thing.
Yeah. It's all 80s thing.
So anyway, so that's coming up this upcoming Friday. That's at bmovieenema.com. That's where you can find all sorts of good stuff that I do. So until next week, when we try to figure out how we're going to spend $30 million in 30 days, I am Jeff Arbuckle.
I'm Chuck Moore.
I'm Jason Oliver, and you have been listening to Film Seizure.